Chapter 18, Minot Wears the Crown. Sensing this would be our last conversation, Minot bade me walk with him to the passageway that led to a balcony. Beneath the stars, we talked the evening away. He had brought a leather sack of wine with him. I began to drink with him. I felt raw, having left so much unsaid between Selith and me. The last I remember seeing him, his shoulder was scarred and did not heal well. All my handiwork. Minot and I spoke about him. He deserved that scar, Jeshibian, if you asked me, Minot said. The balcony led to a private room, the one from which our father watched Botaj being exiled from Archaea 2 years ago. If the tables had been turned, it would have been you who had that scar, or worse. He was Botaj's protege, I added. Pretty much, with the big exception that Selith defended Archaea and did not plan what Botaj plans. Minot sighed. With that, we were at a loss of words, the muffled sounds of the celebrators below. And once we have those 1,000 guns, it should all be settled, right? He said with sarcasm in his tone. He poured wine for us and drank. We sat by a large table by the glow of candles. What happened to you? I asked, boldly, plainly. I inherited the crown, brother, and became lord of this land, he answered, again, with sarcasm. Exactly, I said, to which Minot took a quick breath. This would be the last time we looked upon each other, and so in knowing my entire story, Minot was obligated to tell me his story. He knew I wanted to know those details he guarded in our more youthful days. You know, he began, I could have been kinder to Botaj, really. We all know his temperament, that he was hot-headed, not subtle or delicate, not entirely too bright. We were quite evenly matched, though, I think. Though he could blacken my eyes or bloody my nose more easily, I had my own favored tactics. I did well to leave him as the insecure louse I thought him to be by my own passive and clever means. Paen knew it, Minot said. There was nothing he didn't know, I said, laughing. This is true. Well, Paen observed how I often led Botaj to make stupid mistakes. Minot cleared his throat. He obviously found it difficult to say more, as if the weight of it all was too real. You did not believe a word of his suspicion of Lord Tanis, did you? I guessed. Minot grinned. Not a word of it. I played along, thinking him the stupid idiot. You see, I knew Botaj to always project what he wanted onto others and not see this about himself. Paen always said it was my duty to help Botaj see this about himself, but he knew I wouldn't. Tanis was an ambitious man, yes, but Botaj, well, we all know he is ambitious. So, after Kuba, fell and broke his arm, I was done with Botaj. I knew that in all my years of withholding from Botaj that one day, if I agreed with him, having looked him in the eye, he could feel validated enough to ride off a cliff, if that was the stupidity he was thinking of. And you agreed to let him make that stupid move, knowing he would do it? I asked. Minot nodded, the both of us witnessing the poor results of his stratagem, his expression conveying a sense of shame. Yeah. We were bitter rivals and never looked out for each other. Paen taught us how, but we never did it ourselves. We never learned, Minot confessed. Minot told me that when he was a child and before I was born, our father was possessed. He was paranoid, and so Suan and the elders, Tomak and Nandi, were convinced that Botaj Khoorhani was planning to murder Minot, thinking Minot born to carry out a curse believed to be placed upon him. The elders faked Minot's death and sent him to Katik to be raised by Lord Dajai and to be kept safe. It was there that he met Master Paen. When I returned, young Botaj at first was happy that I wasn't dead, but it was the attention that I got that angered him. Once I came back, it didn't help that I flaunted so much. That story I told you about me and the Bakhuela, how Paen used me as an instrument of his grace, was true. It was real. But I sought to possess what was given. And that bright moment, it seemed as though I could not be stopped. It was unbelievable. I grinned widely. Minot noted that grin. So you know what I'm speaking of then? Of course you do, he said, and I nodded, recalling how I had been so moved by Paen, saved from the trenches of war. Well, the stories about me, or who everyone assumed was me, overshadowed Botaj, and he resented me, and at every turn over the years he did his best to be seen as better than me. Even Father seemed to hold me in higher regard than him, and I flaunted it, as I said. This aspect of acceptance from our crazy father and my pride calcified and became this hard, smooth, and glossy pearl to which I would refer to myself over and over, myself referring, sucking the grace out of my being like marrow from bone. Paen told me that unless I gave him my pearl, I would wear our father's crown, and I didn't believe it when he said that. But here I am. In retrospect, I know why Paen offered his hands to be bound by Tomak, why he surrendered. It was to test me. I failed, Minot said. Later, the master talked to me over his table, a single candle glowing in the wee hours between us. You are right, Jeshibian. In spite of the better choices presented, your brothers only chose the crown, despite what I've shown them. No one can be forced. Otherwise, I am the great oppressor. Yes, it is over. As you can see now, even your brother has drawn certain lines against me. There can be no bargaining. I hope you can understand that there cannot be an ounce of ego to be the freedom that I am. We had returned to the master's dish very late. Bren, drunk, was still and snoring in his tent. Chapter 19, A Glimpse with Infinity's Eyes. The gold was collected from Minot's treasury and the men assembled, but to no avail, for the master interfered. The rains will be starting in 3 days' time, and that weather Medea will suffer. Word was sent to Archaea, which upset my brother Minot, who wished to quickly fortify his army, as well as Bren, who seemed eager to get on the way. The master turned the party away, in defiance of the Ta's command that they should leave despite the weather. What do they know, stupid, greedy men? The master grumbled to me. The rains did indeed start, and days earlier than anticipated. It was a hard and long downpour, the air thick, and the sky gray. I passed the time with Bren. We sat together indoors and he taught me how to play chess. He had a small board with tiny pieces and he showed me their relationships. I did not do too well against him for many games. I insisted on speaking to him in his language, but at his request, I told him the story, in Khoorhani, of how Master Paen rode into Archaea against my father's army. Bren listened intently, then pursed his lips in an uptight manner and only nodded his head. You don't believe the story, do you? I asked. Bren put up his hands and said, I didn't say that. But you need proof to accept it, huh? I said, laughing at his skepticism. Bren admitted it. So what do they believe in the land of Bane? I asked. In my country, Telalal, there are many different religious groups, he said, and he clarified that Bane was a planet. How about you? What do you believe? I asked. I don't know, Joshua. I've visited many cultures and I still don't understand who people pray to. The master and Medea sat and meditated. I could see them from across the room beneath a dim glow through the thick multicolored skylight in the master's roof. Why do they just sit together like that? Bren then asked in Banish. You mean you don't know? I asked. Bren looked at me with a steely expression. Should I? He asked. You don't know who she is, I ventured, which seemed to strike an uncomfortable nerve. What are you implying? He said. Suddenly I saw a shape on the board and moved my knight to a place that I intuited to be a good move. I took his bishop and checked both his king and queen. His queen was trapped. It seemed my learning in relationship to Bren was becoming mysteriously accelerated. I mean, Bren, that you should tell me more about her. He stared at the board, bewildered, then looked at me. The implication of the chess move having significance in the context of my question. Bren appeared to struggle to find a way out of sacrificing his queen and getting out of telling me about his involvement with Medea. No piece directly threatened my knight, and my request was logical, one that he should honor unless he wished to raise more suspicion. This point framed well in that moment. Interesting, Bren muttered in Khoorhani. Still, I could see past his coolness. He was slightly nervous, but willing to play it out. They call her Neada, or Medea, he said reluctantly. She's not from my world, not from Bane. Why is she with you? I asked. There was a long pause as Bren looked for his own shape on the board, the solution, the countermeasure. Careful now not to underestimate me. She's with me. She's with me because I rescued her from those who wished her harm. My Ta sent me to stop them, Brent said, and then he went on after a heavy sigh. You see, on her world, there are those who need her, worship her, and those that want to kill her. Kill her? Why? I gasped in shock. This brought a disturbing light to it all, to my mission. Because of what she represents to some, a political rebellion, great purpose against a growing tyranny in her country, he said. And who does your king sympathize with on her world? I asked, probing deeper. He switched to Danish. Don't worry. Though King Doffiel could not be described as a necessarily good man, he and Telalaw certainly do not wish to kill her, Joshua, he said as he moved his king to safety. The irony not lost to me. I was then quiet, looking at the board and considering Brent's story, deciding whether or not to believe it, or needing my own proof. I could have taken his queen, but then saw another move to checkmate his king, my bishop, taking a pawn. Bren, I began. Master Paen said Nayada will open her eyes soon, and she will see like he does. This is why they sit all day, why they meditate, I said, a coin given to him for more information, and yet a standing of my own ground. That's checkmate, Joshua. Pretty good. I won't be so easy on you next time. He stood to go for another smoke. Bren, and this is why the rain is here, I said to him as he left. It isn't time for her to go yet. Bren glanced at me. He didn't like that. He could not pretend to not hear me. But you probably don't believe me, I said. The rains stopped for a moment, and Bren and I stepped outside. He smoked a cigar, and after a few puffs he asked, So, what did you mean in there about, her seeing like your master? How does he see? The question revealed an intense curiosity, and I told him about the master's enlightenment, that he saw with infinity's eyes and that he lived beyond body and mind. Bren nervously blew out smoke rings, his eyes darting at me. After a long pause, Bren said, That's exactly what they say about her potential. It's what they fear about her. The conservatives fear this. Conservatives of banks, the Haktoin, they're who we should worry about, not King Doffiel. At least not yet. The raindrops began to fall again, and Bren seemed momentarily delighted by the revelation. Perhaps he underestimated Paen as well. Perhaps this is why Medea, Nayada, was not afraid of Bren, because a thirst existed deep within him that not even Bren was aware of. I believe now that Bren did not wish to deliver her into harm's way. Planet banks, Bren said. What? Medea's homeworld is called Banks, Josh. He made the shape of a circle with his hands to help me understand the idea of a planet. The rain began to pour hard again, beating the mud into submissive pools, and we went inside. Bren told me about the complexities of his world. That planet Bane conquered planet Banks 6 centuries ago, but granted its independence 2 centuries ago. He told me grand stories of that history, about the great civilizations of each planet and the awful wars they fought. I was intrigued. I imagined the places he described, grand cities made of stone and metal, and the impressive means of travel that were common to his race. He seemed delighted by my drive to know more, and he drew rough sketches with my quill pen to accompany his tales. At one point, we could not stay inside, rain or no rain, and we walked into the jungle together, along the deepening river. While on a green log by a flooded pond, Bren told me more about Medea's people, the Haktoin. So the present government of the Haktoin has declared her religion illegal, Bren said. It's pretty typical. Anyway, she's, not Sade. It's a religious minority, Bren explained. When we finally agreed to Banks's independence, the modern thinkers, their ruling class, they did well to cleanse their culture of old religious models in favor of pure materialism, science, and militarism. Cleanse? I asked, naively. Bren looked at me from beneath a wet brow, his thick hair stuck to his neck in sweaty circlets. They're killing them, Joshua, all to, in the Sanhedrin's narrow point of view, prevent terrorism and fundamentalism. It's all propaganda. Basically, they want to quell any kind of resistance to what is being taught and accepted now. Planet Banks fostered so much resentment against Bane, my planet. During our colonial times, the Haktoin closed all its spaceports and bulked up its navy, much like you, Khoorhani, and your fences. I shook my head. The Natsari are in hiding, what's left of them. When Medea was born, she fulfilled a prophecy that the Natsari goddess would take form, from dragon to human, and teach among all Haktoin. Restore some kind of balance. I don't know. I don't really get it. I've read quite a bit about her. Their legend says that before the child is born, she will appear as a dragon flying between two Banks Issathene moons. My dream! I then exclaimed. What? My dream! Joshua, you're not making sense. What do you mean? I dreamt that I found Master Paen. I had to chase after him, but I found him. And the place that I found him in my dream was just like that. Purple sky, large endless oceans, and two strange, bright, pale moons. And a dragon flying in the sky. Bren stopped walking and took a hard look at me. A look of suspicion crept over his face. Then consternation. How do you even know that? Know what? So are you being coy with me? Are you going through my things? I didn't say anything about oceans or the purple. No, I did. But it's the same place, isn't it? He did not answer. He only laughed and shook his head, puzzled. Bren, that's the place. That's Planet Banks, isn't it? I pressed. Yeah, that's what it looks like mostly. Purple sky, vast, rich and deep oceans, bigger than any landmass. I loved it there when I got a chance to see it. I'm sorry, Josh, I'm just a little bit freaked out by all this moon dream stuff. Inside we dried off, and Bren was now quiet, seated beside the fire, the glow strange against his face. He looked at me after some time and said, I had this dream too. The one you described. And he laughed as if it was ridiculous, but then he looked serious again. He seemed agitated, eager to get moving, but he also knew the rains were too severe. Bren left the dish and busied himself with more preparations. Later, a kind of thirst came over me to see both the Master and Medea. A sweet attraction to be in their presence, but it also occurred to me how unique an occasion this time was. I sat with them. It was quiet, only the sound of rain as candlelight flickered and the Master gazing beyond me. I did not oftentimes meditate with the Master, which only occurred to me when I saw Medea sitting so perfectly with him. She was an example of divine perfection. Only now, at this critical time, did I have any inclination to practice thusly, stilling myself before him. Never once had I even asked to be with him this way. I felt so foolish. I again felt the possessive and pathetic center of the universe, and yet the master only smiled as he gazed at me, undoing my worst. So I dropped my inner conversations and stories of self-affliction as I only felt love for him. The silence drew me in. I sat with him, and it was clear that all I wanted was to be with him. But then he rose, wrapped himself, and went out into the rain, leaving me alone with Medea. Again, I teetered on the tightrope of attraction and utter fear as she sat by me, not moving. I then braved looking at her. What was this great fear-laced attraction to her? She seemed terrifying, and I felt I should beware in contemplating her. Her snake-like patterned skin reminded me of the day death stood before me in hooded reptilian form. I could not escape the association, and so I looked off to the left of her, at her cheek, the attraction and terror simultaneously together in my heart and gut. I then felt her small hand on mine. An invitation. I entered into her whiteless eyes, into her infinite gaze. She was indescribably beautiful. I could not resist her, and so I stopped avoiding her and stepped into the death of my ideas of myself. I fell into her. She was gentle, her heart so bright, so dear, innocent, but somehow I knew she had the very wildness of a dragon. It then occurred to me that it was her need that inspired me to learn Bren's language. It was her need that I should have an intense curiosity about his world and her world. Suddenly a greater intuition could be felt. Everything was occurring because she appeared, and my volition was her whim. I was being fed by her, my capacities given to me by her, in the same manner that they rose while wielding Mahabharata on the battlefield years ago. She was the same as Paen, and he served her need as well as her guru, helping her to awaken. And with that intuition, I saw that now was the perfect time for my own thirst to come forward, for me to sit. I understood now that the years I thought I wasted were just the years that the divine did not call me to this moment, here and now, before Medea's wonderful, infinite gaze, so sweet, so pure. There was no one, only God, the Great One Consciousness. I was but her stringed puppet. Medea then touched my forehead, and a great force rushed downward into me. It is difficult to describe it as anything other than facing death. My point of view was drowning in this indescribable white, ecstatic flow. It opened me, ripped me so. It threatened to fill me to bursting at the seams. It was huge, dwarfing me, quick, intense, and quite beyond my capacity to withstand. In shock and in complete terror, I fell backward. I breathed heavily as my heart beat at a frenzied pace. I calmed though, and I could feel Medea, as if by this necessary entry into me she made me sensitive to her, created a link between us. She seemed to be calming me. I no longer heard my own voice in my head, as if it had been absorbed temporarily, eaten perhaps, and then my mind was perfectly quiet, with no thought related to me, Jeshibian Khoorhani. There was no rising, no binding, none of his desires, none of his guilt. I then could feel Medea speaking. One day you will be ready. I looked at her, and she smiled at me.
And you will come to me completely. You will be prepared. I swear it. I swear it. I will prepare you, my friend.
She was indeed the master, the same as Khalid, the same as Paen. I felt a great joy as I clasped my hands and bowed to her. As the downpour intensified outside, I sat with Medea, gazed into her infinite eyes, and loved her. There was no distance for me to travel. It was all my imagination. Paen only gave me a way to what he was already. It rained fiercely that night, and I fell away to the dream tree. This time, I watched as its hundreds of glowing branches reached upward, beyond the heavens. They seemed to dig into the sky, planting themselves deeply into the heavens. They then pulled open the sky, revealing bright white light, which then subsided and revealed through the hole in the sky a constellation never before seen. Climb, the tree commanded me, lowering many of its branches. I awoke. The rains had let up.